Hello, class, and welcome to this lecture in social psychology. My name is Dr. Neil Soggie, and this lecture we will be talking about terror management theory, which I think is one of the most fascinating areas of social psychology. Because in this, we're going to delve into what it means to be human and how humans cope with their awareness of their own mortality. We all know that we're going to die, and that creates this little bit of dread within us that we live with every day, and we try to deny it, but it is always there, and that influences us in some really profound ways that I think you might find very interesting. So this theory really examines how our thoughts and behaviors are often shaped by the reality that our lives are finite, and that in fact we live in this unavoidable reality that someday we are going to die, and that is profoundly upsetting and unsettling. So as we embark on our journey to understanding this awareness of death, we're going to be looking at how it impacts our beliefs, our faith, our religion, our values, our relationships, and of course our sense of self. And we'll explore how terror management theory proposes that humans create symbolic systems. That's what culture is for. That's what religion is for. That's what social norms are for. The whole point of these things are to buffer against that fear of mortality. And that's what separates us from so many other creatures in the world. And so we'll also see how self-esteem functions as a psychological shield and protects us from this kind of existential anxiety by helping us to feel valuable and connected to something bigger than ourselves, basically something immortal in some ways. So throughout this lecture, we'll meet some of the key theorists. First off, we'll meet Ernest Becker, and then Jeff Greenberg and Sheldon Solomon, each of whom has expanded our understanding of how people manage existential fear in diverse ways. And we'll look at their perspectives, and we'll research their findings and the real world examples that illustrate how terror management theory works. So I hope that you really enjoy this lecture. This is something that is very much near and dear to my heart, being somebody that has spent a lot of his time studying religion and the functions of religion in healing. This is something that I find very fascinating, and also some of the dangers of religion and of culture and how that can impact us. So there are three main themes that I want to kind of highlight today. And I don't have a special story about any one person, but there are a few different people that I'm going to highlight throughout this lecture. And I think what I'm going to do is just go through the different themes, and then as I go through these themes, I will introduce these people. So the first theme that I have is the theme of mortality awareness, which is basically the recognition of our inevitable death and its impact upon our psychological health. And so we'll explore that whole concept of what we call mortality salience, which means basically what does our knowledge of our own death and our own recognition of our own mortality mean to us. And this kind of refers to that moment where we are especially aware of our mortality and how this awareness influences our thoughts and emotions and behaviors. So we'll see how mortality awareness can lead to what we call defense reactions, and how this affects everything from our self-image to our relationships. And the second theme focuses on cultural worldviews. Now, according to terror management theory, cultural beliefs and values serve as a buffer against existential anxiety and really kind of offers individuals a sense of purpose and order and permanence. And cultural worldviews, whether they are religious or social or ideological, give individuals a sense of belonging and significance. And this theme explores how people rely on their worldviews to feel connected to something greater than themselves, which helps diminish the anxiety associated with the awareness of death. And then finally, there is the theme that really kind of highlights the role of self-esteem in managing existential fear. Because self-esteem, when we look at it from the framework of terror management theory, is really a psychological resource that provides us with a sense of worth and meaning. And by aligning themselves with culturally valued attributes and achievements, people build self-esteem, which acts as kind of a protective shield against their fear of mortality. Now, it can lead to some rigidity. That's the danger. And so these themes examine how self-esteem influences behavior and decision-making, and how people strive to maintain and protect their self-worth in the face of existential threats. So, to truly understand terror management theory, we really need to start with the work of Ernest Becker, who was a cultural anthropologist and psychologist who really kind of laid the groundwork for this field. Now, he was born in 1924 in Massachusetts, I believe. And Becker's life and career were really kind of defined by a desire to understand human nature and the profound fears that lie beneath our conscious thoughts and actions. Now, Becker himself died relatively young. He was only 49 years old when he died. But his work really kind of laid a significant impact because it was so foundational to the human experience. He wrote a book, for example, just before, about now a year before his death is when it was published, called The Denial of Death. And in this, he explores the concept that humans are driven by an underlying fear of their own death. And he won a Pulitzer Prize from this book. And in this, he argues that humans, unlike animals, were cognitively aware of our death. And this creates this existential anxiety within us. And according to Becker, this fear is so overwhelming that people develop ways to deny it or to suppress it, primarily through our cultural beliefs, through our personal achievements, and our symbolic immortality. Now, his theory is often picked up by a field of psychology called existential psychology, which I consider myself a part of, and that's part of the reason why I like Ernest Becker's work, because it posits that people create meaning in life as a way to cope with their knowledge that they're going to die. And this kind of brings in religion, because Becker believed that religion and cultural beliefs and even our national identity and our national fervor, our patriotism, are ways of they're coping mechanisms. And they provide people with a sense of belonging and purpose where they can outlive their own physical existence. And so basically in-groups and the whole idea of in-groups and out-groups really stems back to we're afraid to die, and we want to be valued, and we want to be immortal by carrying on in the group or having children or something else. And so he suggests that much of human conflict stems from clashes between cultural belief systems, because people are just seeking to validate their own worldview, and they want to hold on to their worldview because it shields them from the reality, the existential fear of their own death, because that is a frightening thing. And so Becker's work on existential fear was really revolutionary and provided a new lens through which to understand that whole phenomenon, like things like to be a hero or to gain fame or our need for social validation really all stem back to terror management. Now, although Becker himself didn't develop terror management theory, that's really kind of, there's three main social psychologists, Jeff Greenberg, Sheldon Solomon, and Tom Pazinski, really the ones that created terror management theory, but they really laid the foundation on Ernest Becker's work. And so the key things that Ernest Becker gave us are the denial of death, that we literally try to live symbolically forever by our success, and that kind of, so we're trying to do things that last, even though we ourselves know we're going to die and disappear and rot into nothing. And this is also, we use our cultural beliefs in order to manage our anxiety, and we try to create symbolic immortality. We try to live beyond our own death in different ways. That's Becker's ideas. And so Becker's work on mortality and existential fear really provides a really powerful perspective on why humans seek meaning and purpose in life. Really, I think his insights suggest that our deepest motivations stem from our desire to avoid the anxiety that arises within us from our awareness of mortality. Now, Becker would say, I think, that individuals adopt a cultural worldview and pursue self-esteem within a group to protect themselves from the terror of death. And these actions, he would argue, allow people to create a sense of symbolic immortality, a way to feel that their lives matter and will somehow endure beyond death. So when Becker talks about cultural worldviews, he's talking about religion or ideology or personal belief systems that serve to protect us against, they're a buffer against existential fears. And when we ally ourselves with beliefs and values, we see ourselves to develop a sense of permanence, and that permanence tends to diminish the anxiety that we have that we are going to die. And so Becker argued that religious beliefs, for example, offer the promise of afterlife, and this provides a person with comfort in the face of death. Similarly, a nationalistic or political belief can give individuals a sense of purpose by connecting them to a larger cause, to lay down your life for your country, or to serve God and the King. That might be an example of, this using cultural worldviews. Then there is the ideas of self-esteem. So when we align ourselves with groups, we build up self-esteem. We achieve success. We gain recognition. We gain social value. We take on roles in life as a way of saying, yes, I do indeed matter. I'm not insignificant. And in so doing, we lessen our fear of death. So when a person is looking to faith, a large part of what we're doing in our psychology is we are aligning our lives with religious doctrines that promise an afterlife. So, like, for example, in Christianity, the belief in going to heaven and living in eternal peace and purpose eases the fear of immortality. It reduces anxiety. When we join the military and we are willing to lay down our life for our brothers in arms, we are buying into the idea of symbolic immortality, that we will, if we do die in battle, that we will be buried with honors and people will remember us. Career achievement is the same way. People want to be recognized. People want to make that groundbreaking discovery as a scientist. People want to create that masterpiece as an artist, as a way of creating symbolic immortality. By leaving a legacy, they're creating something that they believe will endure and be remembered long after they are gone. The same thing can be said for children or for families or for generations. We pass on values and traditions and culture and wealth and from generation to generation. We raise our children, we nurture bonds, and we have children, and we value them partly because it is a place of immortality for us. And so Becker's perspective offers a profound insight into psychological motives behind things like cultural beliefs and personal achievements. Think, for example, of how universities are built, for example, or great institutions or national monuments. What are they built of? They're built of brick. Even look at Sisseton Wahpeton College. All brick buildings. Why? Because it creates a sense of long-lastingness, of immortality. If you look at national monuments, look at different monuments around South Dakota that are nationally recognized. They're all of stone. Why is that? Because stone lasts. In our mind, it is immortal. And that creates this sense of extending beyond ourselves. And so it creates in us a sense of immortality. And we like that because it waylays some of the anxiety that we always live with, our awareness of our own mortality. Now, I want to kind of introduce another fellow by the name of Jeff Greenberg, who is one of the actual founders of terror management theory. Jeff Greenberg works alongside a fellow by the name of Tom Pazinski in the 1980s and were inspired by Becker's work. And Greenberg really contributed to terror management theory by introducing the concept of mortality salience. That is, that the awareness of death and how it influences human behavior. So his work investigates how reminding people of their mortality can trigger specific psychological defenses, leading them to seek validation through cultural beliefs and bolster their self-esteem. So some interesting things. Greenberg's research has consistently shown that when people are reminded of their mortality, they often exhibit heightened loyalty to their cultural worldviews. And this increases their prejudice against outgroups and strive to have more intense protection for their self-esteem. And he has done some fascinating work around how the entire nation of America has been manipulated by views of outside threats and how that has been used to influence the popularity of certain candidates within politics, and is called that out as just simple manipulation, but yet it works. Now, one of Greenberg's most notable experiments really kind of involved exposing participants to some mortality-related thoughts. So, like, do an exercise where you think of your own death and then observing how that thinking impacts the person's attitudes and behaviors. And these experiments revealed that under mortality salience, individuals tend to cling more strongly to their cultural beliefs. They tend to be more defensive against any perceived threats to their worldview. They tend to be more simplistic in their thinking. They tend to be less open to diversity. And the reality is that this shows that terror management theory is a real thing. That we really do use our worldview as a psychological buffer against the anxiety associated with death. And so one of the important things to do in order to be a mature person is first off to take time in our life and in our lifelong development to accept our own mortality, to plan and integrate our own mortality into our life, and then from that help us to manage our own sense of our worldview, so that we're not controlled by our worldview, that we can actually look at our mortality and go, okay, I am okay with that. I'm not going to let that anxiety manipulate me anymore. And I'm going to be loving and caring to all people. Because very oftentimes, that is not what people do, although that is what people should be doing. So, reminder, Jeff Greenberg's ideas: mortality salience, worldview defense, and in-group bias, and out-group hostility, basically. Now, here's some interesting things from Greenberg's work. Greenberg, as I mentioned, did experiments that demonstrated that when you remind someone of death and their own death, they tend to defend their cultural beliefs very fiercely. We call this worldview defense, and this means that an individual gravitates towards beliefs and values and practices that offer a sense of security and meaning. But Greenberg argues that under conditions of mortality salience, people become more defensive of their worldviews and show greater loyalty to their in-groups. So Greenberg also highlights the role of self-esteem in buffering against anxiety, existential anxiety. He says that culturally valued attributes or achievements, I'm going to have the great job, I'm going to get the big house. These are all things that bolster our sense of self-worth. And we don't really need a big giant house. We don't really need a super expensive, stressful job, but we do these things in order to reduce our fear of death. And this is why, according to Greenberg, mortality salience often leads people to pursue activities or roles that are going to reinforce their self-esteem, such as career success, social status, or moral alignment with societal values. And that's how you get oftentimes very judgmental religious people, is that they are using their own existential anxiety and attack others in order to make themselves feel better. Now, some interesting real-world examples from Greenberg. These are pretty old examples now, but I want to kind of give them to you anyways. One of his works was on patriotism, such as the aftermath of the September 11th attacks. When people were reminded of mortality, Americans became very patriotic, and there was just this massive rush of joining the military, volunteering for things. And it was an increased hostility and prejudice to outside groups and this rise in discrimination against Muslim countries. And Greenberg saw this as an activation of this mortality salience. The other thing can happen with religious devotion and rituals. Now, true, religion does reduce existential anxiety, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but here's something to kind of be mindful of. When people experience crises, when people experience natural disasters or life-threatening illnesses, that's when people tend to seek out religious beliefs, because they're looking for that afterlife, that promise of the afterlife, that eternal purpose. And that's often why mortality reminders are a part of religious services to reaffirm their faith and reinforce their cultural worldview and seek a symbolic immortality. So there's an existential manipulation there that goes on as well. And the same thing can happen, though, in consumerism and materialism. When we are pursuing material goods, we are bolstering our self-esteem. When we say we want that boat or we want that super nice sports car, we are looking for status. We are looking for luxury items that symbolize success and personal worth. What we're doing is tricking our emotions to tell us that we matter, that we are living a life of significance, and that we truly aren't insignificant and going to die. So it's kind of it's a way of tricking ourselves into feeling immortal, when in fact we're not. The same thing can happen in political polarization. When we have the Republicans and Democrats at each other's throat, each one is getting pulled and getting very antagonistic of people that do not agree with them politically, but oftentimes people don't think through the actual policies of these different groups. They're going with identity, and they're going with identity of being a Republican or a Democrat for the reason of it making them feel better, making them feel like they are a part of something eternal. And again, it's making them reduce their existential anxiety of mortality rather than really having anything to do with politics whatsoever. And it's important for us as learned individuals to be aware of that, so that when we are dealing with politics, and dealing with other people and talking about politics or religion or worldview kinds of things, we don't get sucked into the same traps. The reality is we're all going to die, and it's important for us to deal with that fear and to manage ourselves in the face of that fear. A true, authentic life is about living in the face of that fear. That's something I want you to keep in mind. Now, I want to introduce you to Sheldon Solomon, who's one of the key figures in terror management theory, along with Tom Pazinski and Jeff Greenberg. He was born in 1951, and he's done a lot of work on this idea of mortality salience as well. And he as well talks a lot about feeling protected from and buffering against the fear of death. And along with others, he has done various experiments that have highlighted the idea of mortality salience, of looking at how when someone is reminded of their own mortality, that it leads people to cling more strongly to their cultural beliefs. That Solomon argues that self-esteem acts as a shield against death anxiety, and that individuals strive to maintain self-esteem in order to reduce that existential anxiety, and that he's shown that cultural beliefs provide a sense of security and meaning, helping individuals feel connected to someone larger and more enduring than themselves. So, within all of this, there's the importance of engaging with all of the different kinds of things that go along with that. Now, one of the things that Sheldon Solomon would say is that self-esteem is a defense mechanism. And I've talked about this already, but he would suggest that people seek self-esteem, they seek cultural beliefs, they seek being part of a larger narrative in order to reduce that anxiety. We hold on to our worldview and our sense of identity, even to the expense of others, because it takes away that fear, and that fear is core to who we are. And whether that be in the stuff that we buy, the political ideologies that we have, the cultural worldviews that we believe, the religious views that we believe, all of it ties back to mortality salience. You know, whether we're a country person versus a rap person, even that, you know, we tend to be one or the other because those are worldviews, and those worldviews help us reduce our fear of death. So if we like country, we probably don't like rap. We like rap, we probably don't like country. Not because either one is bad music, but has more to do with the worldview that we're buying into, and how, if we are holding on to that worldview, then it reduces our fear of death. But here's the thing. If we actually grew and mature to the point where we accepted our death, not that we want to die, but we live in a real reality that, yeah, I'm going to die someday. It might be tomorrow. I have my plans made. I have my funeral all paid for. Everything, all someone has to do is kind of to inform people that, yeah, I've died and everything will be taken care of. And I have consciously been a part of that process. That is a true, authentic person. You're not being manipulated necessarily by terror management theory then. So, just what Sheldon Solomon is saying there is that in order to be authentic, we really need to be aware of our own death. That we're really no more significant, in his words, we're really no more significant than a lizard or a potato. that we're going to die and we're going to disappear. And the reality of that is terrifying for us. And that's why we do all the things that we do. Very profound, but also ultimately very true. And you can think in terms of, there's a biblical book from Solomon ben David. It's like 3,000 years old, called the Book of Ecclesiastes, or Koheleth. And in it, it says this, vanity, vanity, everything is vanity. Basically, it says that we are a puff of smoke. Everything that we are and hold and value is really just a puff of smoke. And we need to realize that in order to live an authentic life. And thinking in those terms can go a long ways to creating maturity. And that's, I think, part of what terror management theory does. Because when people are manipulated by their fear of death, they're unkind to others, they're being really inauthentic in their own existence, and that can cause some problems. So, what's the value of terror management theory? I think it's that it provides some insights into how the awareness of mortality shapes our daily human life. It really does impact every moment of our day in very subtle ways, but also very complex ways. Terror management theory suggests that much of what we do is motivated by a need to mitigate that existential anxiety and sense of, feel a sense of meaning and stability and purpose. And this will be, something that impacts our everyday life, our relationships, our social behavior, our goals, our desires, our beliefs, our values, our religion, our politics, everything. So if we are looking for a social psychological theory to explain your life, this would be the place to look. And that's part of the reason why I like terror management theory. So it explains why people often seek close supportive relationships to provide comfort, because it provides us comfort against our existential fears. The knowledge that someone else cares about us and values our existence can be a strong buffer against that mortality anxiety. Romantic relationships, for example. People may find reassurance in the thought of building a life with another person and leaving a legacy through a family or shared experiences. So friendships and community bonds are also a form of symbolic immortality, as people feel part of a lasting social network that offers support and continuity. The pursuit of career success and achievement can also be understood through terror management theory to be a way of gaining self-esteem and symbolic immortality. So by excelling at your career, people feel they are making a meaningful impact that will outlast them, which provides psychological comfort. People often strive to make their work meaningful, whether this is through helping others, through innovating in their fields, or simply gaining recognition, all of which helps mitigate existential concerns by affirming their value and purpose. Consumerism and owning things is an act really of symbols of status and worth, which can enhance self-esteem. We buy things, we want to acquire things, not because we need them, because really we can live in a tent, we can live in a teepee, we can just live by a fire and we will survive. But these things that we have, our boat or our new iPhone, all of these things can be buffers against anxiety of mortality. So for instance, someone might purchase luxury clothes so that they can be admired, so they can be seen as success. This is symbolic immortality. We might be very patriotic, or be very committed to our tribe or our group, because it creates a sense of belonging in the face of existential fears. People take pride in their cultural identity, in their national identity, because it helps them to feel immortal in the face of their own temporary existence. And so it's a way of seeking psychological comfort. We do a lot in our life to seek comfort that we don't even realize. Religion is another example of this. We engage in religions, we engage in beliefs about the afterlife and moral purpose and divine protection, partly because we desire a literal immortality, and it promises something like that. So the prayers, the worship, the religious rituals are there and are powerful sources of comfort. But part of what it's doing is helping you to connect to an enduring system of meaning that transcends your own personal mortality, what some would call a super meaning. It's not a lived meaning, it's a super meaning. It's something beyond you that gives you help. Being kind to others, being philanthropic, giving gifts to charities, working with charities, creating positive impacts in the world, helping your fellow neighbor, can also create a legacy, which is a sense of symbolic immortality that reduces fear and anxiety. So many people engage also in personal self-improvement in order to build their self-esteem, in order to reduce that existential anxiety. But as I mentioned, one of the best ways to live an authentic life is to recognize our mortality, not to be controlled by it. I'm not suggesting that you get so overwhelmed that you live in a constant state of anxiety, but rather that recognizing mortality is a part of life, and do it in a deep way, not just in an abstract way, but say, yeah, I know I'm going to die someday, but say, yeah, I am going to die someday. What does that mean? What does that mean for my choices? What does that mean for what I'm doing in my life? And how can I make my life count in the midst of that? Recognizing that what we are actually doing is trying to reduce that anxiety, but at least we can do it in a positive way, because that anxiety is something that's always going to be there. So I want to just conclude with these key concepts. First off, the idea of mortality salience is the idea that when we are reminded of our mortality or our awareness of death, that this will lead individuals to react defensively. And they will start to cling to their cultural beliefs, to their religion. They will seek validation in their job. They will try to enhance their self-esteem. And basically, they're trying to reduce that feeling of mortality that they really know that is there. And this ties in with worldview defense, because that's one of the strategies that we use to defend ourselves against this existential anxiety, is doing things that reinforce and defend our cultural worldviews as a way to buffer against this existential anxiety. So worldview defense can lead to stronger in-group loyalty. So like, my religion is better than your religion, or my tribe is better than your tribe, or my nation is better than your nation, or my business is better than your business, all leads to prejudice against those that challenge or differ from our beliefs. And that's really the reason for it. It's about, why do we do these things? We do these things because we're scared of dying. And then self-esteem is a buffer. That's the same thing. Self-esteem provides us with a sense of worth, of value, a sense of significance. It helps us to feel secure and meaningful in the face of our existential fears. But by achieving self-esteem through our cultural culturally valued behaviors or accomplishments, individuals can reduce our anxiety about mortality. So, like, for example, 200 years ago or 300 years ago, members of a Dakota tribe, if they were kind of wandering through the Sisseton area, if they met a 7-foot guy that could throw a ball in through a hoop, they wouldn't care. There's no significance or value to that at all. But if that same 7-foot guy showed up today and could slam a basketball, everybody would be like all excited. Whoa, we have this NBA player. It's all about context as well, right? It's all about cultural value. So we get self-esteem through culturally valued behaviors. That's the thing. And that helps to reduce our fear of death. But really, again, in order to live an authentic life, we need to incorporate that into our reality. So, when it comes to terror management theory, what is the primary psychological function of self-esteem? It is pretty straightforward. It is B, to provide a buffer against existential anxiety related to morality. Okay? We're afraid of dying. We want to reduce that anxiety in whatever way that we can. I hope you found this lecture on terror management theory really fascinating, and I really do encourage you to engage in a lifetime of kind of exploring this area, because this is one of those areas that will help you to really improve the quality of your own ability to live an authentic life. Hope you enjoyed this lecture, and I will see you next week. You take care. Bye-bye.